Hey, what's going on, everybody? And welcome back to College Football Red Zone, where I go ahead and take a holistic look at all 138 FBS programs. Going to give you my general thoughts on the roster going into this season, as well as give you that 50,000 feet perspective in terms of what I'm looking at in terms of a record prediction in the 2026 college football season based on how things stand here in the springtime. So it is subject to change. So hey, hopefully you guys are very excited for this one as we are talking about the Rutgers Scarlet Knights, who come in as my 63rd ranked team in college football this season. So, go ahead, get yourself comfortable, enjoy some Rutgers talk, and if you are excited for it as well, make sure you go ahead, hit that like button as well as hit that subscribe button as well. If you do happen to be brand new to the channel, and so let's go ahead and get things going here with this Rutgers football program led by Greg Schiano. And Greg Schiano, whether it's talking about his very first stint that's been there from 2001 to 2011, or the current stint that they have going on right now that started in the COVID season and he's been around for quite some time. Combined, we are talking about 17 years of Rutgers football under his tutelage. And even though the record isn't too terribly impressive, he is sitting at 9 games under 500 with a 99 and 108 overall record. He has been the best coach that Rutgers football has had in the 2000s. And I don't like to normally say this terminology, but it definitely applies here. But it's not even close here, right? And so you look at Greg Schiano, and ever since what we saw transpire in the Chris Ash era, and the Chris Ash era was a complete disaster out there in New Jersey. He comes back in, and he does at least stabilize the program. But really, right off the gate, one of the bigger questions that we're going to have with Rutgers football is, has the game passed him by a little bit? The transition to the Big Ten, going from the like the Big East and finding a home in the Big Ten, it's been one of those situations where, it has not really worked out in terms of how things panned out from a football perspective. And really, since he's taken over during this NIL and transfer portal era that we've seen, this has not been a year where they've had a tremendous amount of success, right? Again, Greg Schiano's done a nice job of making sure that it's not a complete bottom feeder and it isn't a complete embarrassment to the university. But also at the same time, they have struggled to move beyond, winning 6 games or 7 games like in a typical season. So, it just makes you wonder, is there something in the tank here? Can Greg Schiano figure this thing out in his 17th year? The old adage of like you can't tell an old dog new tricks. Can this old dog learn some new tricks so that Rutgers can get in the right direction and be one of the better programs in the Big Ten? So I look at it from a coaching perspective, what that's looking like. I also have a couple of questions about the roster as well in terms of how is Dylan Lonergan going to look at the quarterback position. He is going to replace Athan Kalamanis, who left to join the NFL ranks. He was a top 300 prospect by PFF going into the NFL draft process. They do bring in Dylan Lonergan, who started his career at Alabama. Then he transfers out to Boston College. And in that year in Boston College, he actually did have an opportunity to play. It was a decent year for him, a little over 2,000 yards, put up 12 touchdowns as well. Really nothing to write home about, but as someone that does have power conference experience at the very least, don't know if he's as good as Athan Kalamanis by any means, but he is, you could do worse at the quarterback position. So could be a slight downgrade here. It's just a matter of what does Dylan Lonergan, can he continue to grow and develop at the quarterback position moving forward? And then also on top of that, what are they going to look like from a pass rushing perspective? I know that Jadan Burnett was brought in for the transfer portal, and he had a nice season with the Tulsa Golden Hurricanes, where he had 6.5 sacks in the 2025 campaign. So Jaden Burnett is going to give him some juice, but there are going to be some other guys that are going to need to step up outside of a Jaden Burnett, who I assume is going to at least be in this Rutgers defensive rotation going into this season, because Eric O'Neill was listed as a top 300 prospect in the NFL draft according to PFF as well. And so because of that NFL draft status, you're really looking at it from a perspective of who's going to step up outside of Jaden Burnett. But holistically, I think beyond that, there's not a ton of questions with the roster. It's more questions of what can Greg Schiano find from a methodology standpoint. That's going to be the biggest question. The roster, I think, is going to be at least a decent roster going into this season. Yes, they did end up losing Ian Strong. He transfers a cow, and that's going to be a really big loss, but they kept the other main perimeter piece on the outside in Caden Duff, who was a second team All Big Ten player last year. And, there's talk about him being a top five wide receiver in all of college football coming into this season, been getting that kind of hype. So you bring KJ Duff back from for this particular aspect of things. I think they're going to be okay in the passing game, but in particular, I think the running back room is going to be really good. You obviously return Antoine Raymond, who's going to be your starter. He was also a second team All Big Ten player last year as well. But they also added some depth beyond Antoine Raymond as well. They added Clay Favorin from Louisiana Tech, who had over 900 total yards of total offense, 8 touchdowns last season as well. Had a quality season for the Bulldogs. Don't expect Clay to start in this Rutgers backfield, but for a running back two, you really can't ask for much more from that running back two position. I think the offensive line is also going to be a little bit better. I really like the addition of Everett Small, who transfers in from Eastern Michigan, and I think that's someone that could come in and start on this Rutgers offensive line right away. I really like the coaching that he received from Chris Creighton. You guys know that from those of you that watched the live show for quite some time. I think they have a really intriguing tight end as well in Cameron Anthony transferring in from Ball State. Another someone that I think is going to be a starting caliber player at the Power 4 level, especially in the Big Ten as well. So really, even though they do lose Ian Strong, I think the perimeter players on the outside and the skill positions, I think is going to serve them somewhat well overall, and that offense is going to keep them involved in some games. And not to mention, they did make some strides on the defensive side of the football as well. They bring in Ty Morris from Rice, who had almost double-digit TFLs last season. They also brought in a couple of nice corners in Bradley Jones from the Citadel and Zamir Duad from Villanova. They combined for over 50 tackles, and they have multiple interceptions as well. So really looking at some solid football players coming up from the FCS level too. So even though Bo Mesco transfers to Texas, and that was a star DB, was a bright spot in what was at best an inconsistent defense. It, I think the defensive secondary is, they can't be worse than last year, even with the loss of Bo Mesco, right? So really, I think they're going to be a little bit better in the front seven. We'll see what they look like on the back end and what they look like from the quarterback position. But yeah, definitely the biggest question of all is what's this coaching staff looking like and how do they handle developing guys moving forward to help them get not necessarily in the basement, but they're in the lower peripherals of the Big Ten right now. How do they get into at least that middle class of the Big Ten? I think is the $1 million question. So let's go ahead now and jump into the record prediction now for the Rutgers Scarlet Knights entering this season. And listen, the Big Ten, it is a somewhat difficult slate to work with, even though you're looking at Rutgers football. They do have one of the easier schedules in the Big Ten. I'm looking at it as they have the second easiest schedule in the Big Ten entering this season. But I just don't know if the coaching is going to be there for them to take full advantage of that, right? So the non-conference, I think they're going to be just fine in the non-conference here. UMass and Howard, they obviously should win those games. And an outside shot that they, should be really competitive. I think that's a really good regional game between Boston College and Rutgers. Literally could swing in either direction. Boston College is slightly favored here as a half-point favorite. So basically a pick 'em in that scenario. Then when you get into conference play, it does get a little bit more difficult. But the good news is for Rutgers here is that some of the more difficult games that they are going to have in conference play, well, they are going to at least have it at home, right? So I would say probably the best pure power rated team that you're going to have on this schedule this year is USC. You will at least get USC at home, and the Trojans are going to have to make a cross country road trip. So do have that as a safe loss, but at the same time, if they were to pull that win off, given that it is a cross country road trip, I wouldn't be completely surprised at the same time as well, right? So there's that. Indiana is also going to be coming into your building, as is Michigan. And then you have Nebraska and Michigan State, which Nebraska and Michigan State in particular, I think those are going to be some winnable games that you can take advantage of here. And then a couple of manageable road games as well in Big Ten play. Maryland on the road, and we'll see if Mike Walkley can figure out how to win games beyond the month of September. If not, that's a game that Rutgers absolutely can win. But Wisconsin as well. On top of that, was Wisconsin even going to look like moving forward as well, right? So, especially with Luke Fickell on the hot seat right now. So, candidly, there is a path here where Rutgers can compete and participate in a bowl game if everything goes right, and Greg Schiano is able to get the most out of this roster. But I'm concerned that the game has passed Greg Schiano by. And because I'm concerned about that, I think that it's going to be a little bit closer to the floor where, listen, worst case scenario, this is a 2-10 football team. And so I have them going 3-9 here. They're going to win the FCS game. They're going to obviously beat UMass. I do think that they beat Michigan State, so they do get at least one Big Ten win. But yeah, I think that this is going to be a year where you really wonder if the game has passed by Greg Schiano and it's time for Rutgers football to go in a little bit of a different direction. But very curious to hear your thoughts on this Rutgers football team. Am I too high on these guys? Am I too low on these guys? Definitely let me know, as I do have them once again as my 63rd ranked team in college football. And so, if you enjoyed this video, man, I need you to go ahead and do a couple of things for me real fast. Hit that like button as well as hit that subscribe button as well. If you do happen to be brand new to the channel, this is Jake from College Football Red Zone signing off. Hoping you guys are all out there having a good one. Take care, everybody.